Thank you. A warm welcome to the board members this morning and the staff. It's Groundhog Day, and I just saw a Weather Channel report that Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow and said so. I don't understand that. It is what it is. But apparently he did. And so we've got 6 more weeks of winter. Of course, I read yesterday that Punxsutawney Phil is right only 40% of the time. So who gives a damn what he thinks? It is what it is. It's also the second day of Black History Month. Hugely important day in the nation, and an important day to those of us who labored, who toiled in that vineyard to try to get this month recognized as Black History Month. A lot of anecdotes, none of which I'll share, but it's a good time of year to get into Black History museums, to look at monuments, to spend some time thinking about this nation's history, and a wonderful time actually to, if you happen to be a Black person, it's a wonderful time to be a Black person. Not that every day isn't a wonderful day to be a Black person. That said, last roll call comment is I want to welcome Amanda Nazario to this group. She will not be called, we're not going to call her the new Diane Folletti. She is Amanda Nazario. She's done a fabulous job of getting this meeting going for this month, and I want to say thank you. Amanda, if you would just say something so the machine will let the folks see you, that'd be great. You just say hello.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you. Thank you very much for picking up that ball and running with it. All right, Sarah, there are some notices that have to be read into the record. If you'll do that, I'd be very grateful.
Very good. Good morning, everyone. We are under executive order again, so we are allowed to hold these meetings via Zoom technology, which we're doing today. So I will read the roll as to who's here and then turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair. With us, we have Al Carney, our board chair, our vice chair, John Johnson, Beryl Snyder, Jerry Romsky, John Gardner, Joan Sullivan, Janice McKinney, Phyllis Morris, Ken Evans, and Wellington Chen. We are missing, and Adrian Swazerski has joined us as well. So we have a full board with us today. And from DASNY staff, we have Ruben McDaniel, Paul Koopman, Caroline Griffin, Kim Ellis, Nadine Fontaine, Portia Lee, Steve Currow, Ricardo Salomon, Kathy Ebert, Steve Kozier, Dave Ostrander, Matt Bergen, Craig Schreivogel, Alex Sardine, Dina Amodio, Deb Fasser, Jeff Gordon, Amanda Nazario, and myself, Sarah Richards, from bond counsel firms who will be presenting today. We have Chris Canada, Sonny Williams, Charles Hawley, Chris Reitzel, and Seth Bryant. And if I missed anyone, can either let us know or send me a quick email. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back over to you.
Ms. Richards, thank you very much. Let's get to the agenda then. The first order of business is the review and a vote on the minutes. You've all had a chance to read the January 5th minutes. Are there any comments, proposed revisions in the minutes? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you both. I guess we can do, Sarah, I can ask whether all are in favor and then ask for any opposition. Is that the reasonable way to do this?
Sounds good.
Okay. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
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 Is there any opposition to the approval of the minutes? Are there any abstentions from the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved and approved by a full board unanimously. The second agenda item, of course, is the Finance Committee report. Mr. Romsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met yesterday by way of Zoom. We adopted the meeting minutes from the November Finance Committee, which was the last Finance Committee meeting. And then we proceeded to discuss two financings. One is the pit sales tax financing. After some discussion, we recommend that it be approved at today's full board meeting. And then we advance to discuss the new school offering. And again, after some discussion, we also voted unanimously to recommend that financing be approved at today's meeting. So unless anyone has any questions or concerns, any comments, that'll conclude my report, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Are there any questions for Jerry? Hearing none, we will advance to the adoption of documents, and that chore falls to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Behind tab 3 is the Oceanside Library transaction summary update. Steve Kozer of DASNY will present, along with Chris Canada of Hudson Russ and Charles Holly of Golden Holly James. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to all. I will provide the board members with a brief update on the status of the Oceanside Library financing, and then turn the presentation over to Chris and Charles to discuss the necessary documents. As presented in the transaction summary update, the board approved a resolution to proceed for the proposed financing at the July 2020 board meeting. There have been no changes to the plan of finance or the security package as described in the transaction summary and report previously provided to the members. However, shortly after the July 2020 meeting, the library placed the financing on hold to review and refine the project design with its architects before requesting approval of the project from the town of Hempstead. While the project review took longer than anticipated, ultimately the project design did not materially change from what was described in the staff report, and the town of Hempstead approved the project this past Wednesday, January 26. All of the necessary local approvals are now in place, including approvals from the library, Oceanside Union Free School District, and the town of Hempstead on the form of the tax pledge and collection agreement. With respect to the approvals DASNY is involved with directly, PACB approved the financing in July 2020. The TEPRA hearing was held this past Friday, January 28th, and the DASNY seeker memo was filed yesterday, February 1st. I will now turn the presentation over to Chris to discuss the bond resolution.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, DASNY board members and senior staff. It's great to be with you here this morning. As further detailed in our letter to the board provided last week, for you for consideration is the adoption of a bond resolution authorizing the issuance of multiple series of bonds at one or more times, and the adoption of a series resolution authorizing the issuance of up to $35 million Oceanside Library revenue bonds. The proposed Series 2022 bonds will be issued pursuant to the proposed bond resolution and series resolution. Bond resolution is a new resolution based on DASNY's new model resolution and constitutes the agreement between DASNY and the holders of the bonds issued under the bond resolution. Bond resolution contains the basic terms of that agreement, including the conditions for issuance of bonds, security for bonds, types of bonds, and accounts to be established for each series of bonds, events of default and remedies, as well as provisions relating to other matters such as amendments to and defeasance of the bonds. The bond resolution does not establish a debt service reserve fund, but provides that one may be established if authorized by a series resolution. I'll now turn the presentation over to my co-bond counsel, Charles Holly, to discuss the series resolution.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, DASNY board members and senior staff. We are further requesting that the board adopt a series resolution under the bond resolution entitled Series Resolution Authorizing Up to $35 million Oceanside Library Revenue Bonds, Series 2022. Authorizing the issuance of the Series 2022 bonds to provide funds to currently fund the Series 2005 bonds, finance the expansion and renovation of the existing main library building, and pay costs of issuance. It is expected that the Series 2022 bonds will be issued in one fixed rate tax exempt series. The Series 2022 bonds will be special obligations of DASNY, payable solely out of the payments made by the library under a loan agreement on account of debt service on the Series 2022 bonds, referred to as the revenues. Payment of the Series 2022 bonds is separately secured by the pledge and assignment of the revenues made pursuant to the bond resolution and the series resolution, DASNY's right to receive such revenues, the monies and investments held in the funds and accounts established by the bond resolution and the series resolution with certain exceptions, and by the assignment by DASNY of the security interest in the pledged revenues, which Chris will describe. Granted by the library under the loan agreement. No debt service reserve fund is expected to be established for the Series 2022 bonds. Additionally, the Series 2022 resolution delegates to any DASNY authorized officer the powers more particularly described in our letter to the board, including to determine the final terms of the Series 2022 bonds and to execute and deliver various documents. I will now turn it back over to Chris to discuss the loan agreement and the tax pledge and collection.
Thank you, Charles. As mentioned, DASNY and the library will execute a loan agreement in connection with the issuance of the Series 2022 bonds. The loan agreement will require the library to make payments to the trustee in amounts and at times sufficient to make timely debt service payments on the Series 2022 bonds. The loan agreement will also require the library to make payments sufficient to pay the fees, costs, and expenses of DASNY and the trustee with respect to the Series 2022 bonds. The loan agreement and the obligations of the library to make payments under it are general obligations of the library. A recurring annual tax levy in an amount sufficient to repay the library's obligations under the loan agreement was previously authorized pursuant to referendums of the library approved on November 30th, 1994 and June 9th, 2020, respectively. The loan agreement will require the library to notify DASNY and the trustee of certain events that could affect the collection of adequate taxes to pay debt service and operating expenses relating to the bonds. To secure its obligations to DASNY in the loan agreement, the library will grant DASNY a security interest in its pledged revenues, comprised of all public funds, all revenues received by the library from its operations, and all other income available to the library from any other source. Public funds consist of all monies apportioned or otherwise payable to the library by the state of New York or a political subdivision. The loan agreement will permit the library to incur additional long-term indebtedness secured by a parity lien on pledge revenues, but not on public funds attributable to the tax referendums previously mentioned. To provide for the payment of debt service on the Series 2022 bonds, the library, the school district, the town, the trustee, and DASNY will enter into a tax pledge and collection agreement. Pursuant to this agreement, the town of Hempstead agrees to collect, and the Oceanside Union Free School District agrees to levy the annual tax previously mentioned in an amount not less than the amount necessary for the library to pay principal, sinking fund installments, and interest on the Series 2022 bonds. This concludes our presentation. Charles and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do the members have any questions for Charles, for Christopher, or for Steve? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you very, very much, Wellington. Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Beryl.
Beryl, thank you. Thank you. Good to have you. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any
Aye.
opposition to? Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion carries. The resolution is passed, and it is passed unanimously by this board. Sarah, you might want to take a look at the resolution date. We may want to make that current, even though that's the date of the original, I guess, proposed resolution, or is there a reason to leave it as it is, July 15th, 2020?
Oh, we'll take a look and make that correct.
Okay, terrific.
For those things, right, for both the general and the series.
Thank you. Mr. President, I'm sorry for the interruption.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Behind tab 4 is the PIT/sales tax single approvals transaction summary. Matt Bergen of DASNY, Chris Reitzel of Nixon Peabody, and Sonny Williams of Bryant Rubino will be presenting. We also have Seth Bryant of Bryant Rubino here as well. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, everyone. The board is being asked to authorize the issuance of multiple series of tax-exempt and or taxable, fixed and or variable rate bonds issued at one or more times in an amount not to exceed $3 billion with a term of 30 years, provided, however, that the maximum term for the portion of the financing related to MTA capital projects would be 50 years. The fiscal year 2022 enacted budget authorized issuances undertaken by the state for MTA capital projects to be issued for a maximum term of 50 years. To provide some background, the state directly contributes to the MTA's capital plan and the pandemic has adversely affected the credit ratings of the MTA Transportation Revenue Bond Program, which increased their cost of borrowing. As a result, the state will issue PIT and/or sales tax revenue bonds to fund the state portions of the MTA's capital plan. Previously, the financial plan assumed that the state's portion of the MTA's capital projects would be bonded for by the MTA, but funded by the state through additional operating aid. And so the state would like the flexibility to issue the proposed bonds under either the sales tax revenue bond program and/or the personal income tax revenue bond program. However, at this time, the current plan is to issue under the personal income tax revenue bond program. The authorization is for new money and refunding purposes, and the new money portion is estimated at approximately $2.1 billion and may include the funding or reimbursement related to capital projects for City University of New York facilities, capital projects for the Office of Mental Health, the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, and the Office of Addiction Services and Supports, capital projects for the State University of New York educational facilities, dedicated highway and bridge trust fund projects, MTA transportation facilities projects, state and municipal facilities grants, housing capital facilities projects, and healthcare grants. In addition to the new money portion, the authorization also looks to cover the refunding of certain bonds issued under various state-supported debt programs in the amount of approximately $780 million. Under security, both the sales tax revenue bond program and the personal income tax revenue bond program are secured by semi-annual payments to be made pursuant to financing agreements between DASNY and the Division of the Budget. For the sales tax revenue bond program, security also includes a set aside of 2 cents or 50% of the state's 4% sales tax pursuant to statute and deposited in the sales tax revenue bond tax fund. For the personal income tax revenue bond program, security also includes 50% of the receipts from the New York State personal income tax, 50% of the employer compensation expense tax, and 50% of the receipts from the imposition of the pass-through entity tax, which shall be deposited into the revenue bond tax fund. For the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022, the debt service coverage on all outstanding state personal income tax bonds is projected to be 9.5 times total debt service, and the debt service coverage on all outstanding sales tax bonds is projected to be 6.6 times total debt service. On the PIT coverage of 9.5 times, this reflects the timing of pass-through entity tax receipts, which have been received. However, the accompanying tax credits, which would be an offset, do not begin until April of 2022. Overall, the Division of the Budget expects that the pass-through entity tax will be revenue neutral to the state. However, because of the timing of the receipts, it may not be revenue neutral within each fiscal year. And finally, the expected ratings of either program are AA2, AA+, and AA+. And Mr. Chairman, now I'd like to hand the presentation over to Chris and Sonny.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone, even remotely, and to put a face with the emails. Amanda, welcome. It's nice to see you. And I'm going to start with a discussion of the supplemental resolutions, and then Sonny will take over and get into some of the detail of each of the programs and the security and the revenues that support the credits. So before you for consideration is the adoption of 2 supplemental resolutions, one under the personal income tax revenue bond program, the other under the state sales tax revenue bond program. Each supplemental resolution authorizes individually and together the issuance of up to $3 billion of bonds, which means that in no event will more than $3 billion of bonds be issued under the supplemental resolutions before you today. In order to provide maximum flexibility, it is proposed that the board authorize the issuance of bonds under both the general purpose PIT bond resolution adopted in 2009 and the sales tax bond resolution adopted in 2013. As described in our letter, the bonds may be issued for any authorized purpose, but are expected to pay for the projects described therein, and Matt gave some detail on that as well, and to refund certain outstanding state-supported bonds. Each supplemental resolution permits bonds to be issued in one or more series or subseries at one or more times, and to be sold on a negotiated basis or through competitive bidding. In addition, all or a portion of the bonds may be issued as tax-exempt bonds and/or federally taxable bonds. Each supplemental resolution also provides for an authorized officer of the authority to execute and deliver one or more supplements to the related financing agreement to reflect any additional issuance under that program. Finally, each supplemental resolution delegates to various officers the power to make the determinations described in our letter and to do all things necessary or convenient in connection with the sale and issuance of the bonds. At this point, I'll turn it over to Sani.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the board, and senior staff. It's really nice to be with you all again, but as Chris said, albeit virtually. For the record, I'm Sani Williams, partner at Bryant Rubino, and I'm going to give a brief overview of the PIT and sales tax programs. My apologies in advance if I repeat anything that Matt brought up with his stellar presentation. So with regards to the PIT program, Article 5C of the state finance law authorizes DASNY and certain other authorized issuers to issue PIT bonds for any authorized purpose. All PIT bonds issued under the general purpose PIT bond resolution are special obligations of the authority, secured by payments to be received by the authority under the PIT financing agreement with DOB. The PIT financing agreement obligates the state to pay debt service on outstanding PIT bonds, notes, and other obligations. Those payments are made from amounts available in the Revenue Bond Tax Fund established by state finance law and are subject to annual appropriation. The Revenue Bond Tax Fund receives statutorily allocated portions of the state's personal income tax receipts, the employer compensation expense program receipts, and the pass-through entity tax receipts. With regards to the sales tax program, Article 5F of the New York State Finance Law authorizes DASNY and certain other authorized issuers to issue sales tax bonds, for any of the purposes for which state-supported debt may or has been issued. All sales tax bonds issued under the sales tax bond resolution are special obligations of the authority, secured by payments to be received by the authority under the sales tax financing agreement with DOB. The sales tax financing agreement obligates the state to pay debt service on all outstanding sales tax bonds issued under the sales tax bond resolution. Those payments are made from amounts available in the Sales Tax Revenue Bond Tax Fund, established by state finance law subject to appropriation. Finally, the Sales Tax Revenue Bond Tax Fund receives a statutorily allocated percentage of the revenues collected from the state's sales and compensating use taxes. This concludes our formal presentation, but Chris and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sani. Are there questions for Sani, for Christopher, or for Matt? Is Seth on the phone?
Yes, he is. Seth?
Seth, if you'll say something, the camera will go to you and we can all welcome you back for calendar 2022.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm a little bit casual, as you see, as I wasn't presenting, but I'm in good company, clearly.
Still look good, Seth. You still look good.
Thank you. Compliments will get you everywhere, my partner. But no, it's a real pleasure to be here. And obviously, DASNY's been, just one of our most important client relationships over the 13 years that this firm has existed. I really credit DASNY and its receptivity to diverse firms is really being the reason why we are on the map. And so I really thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. President, and the board members and senior staff of DASNY. So thank you very, very much for all of your support over the years.
Seth, you're very kind to join the call. It's great to have you with us. I know you're busy, and I'm not going to keep you. You may not have noticed that I am not particularly formal today. Just thought I'd point that out.
No, I said I'm in great company.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any questions for Sonny or for Christopher or for Matt? It's a big deal, huge deal. I have not seen a copy of the resolution. I know what these resolutions look like, and I'm not going to. I am going to vote, but let me ask for a motion to adopt the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Wellington. Thank you, Jerry. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition to the motion? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion passes, and it passes unanimously. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a resolution to proceed behind tab 5. This is the new school transaction summary, and Dave Ostrander from DASNY will be presenting. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, all. The staff report provided to the members presents one or more series of tax exempt and or taxable, fixed and or variable rate bonds in an amount not to exceed $186,925,000 on behalf of the new school. The proposed transaction includes both new money and refunding components, both of which are aimed at furthering the university's strategic capital plans while also providing long-term savings. For the new money portion, proceeds will be used to finance costs associated with the acquisition, renovation, and equipping of a 12-story building located at 318 East 15th Street in Manhattan to provide residential living space for the university students. The facility has been leased by the university as a residence hall since 2009. The purchase of the building will allow the university to upgrade the existing space while also reducing capital costs associated with the facility. The university expects to save at least $3.2 million annually through the purchase and renovation of the property and the elimination of the annual lease expense. As far as the refunding portion, proceeds will be used to refund all or a portion of the university's Series 2011 bonds issued by DASNY. The proposed refunding is expected to result in net present value savings in the range of $3 million or 19% of the refunded bonds. As far as security, the outstanding obligations of the university have been assigned a rating of A3 from Moody's and BBB+ from S&P. With these investment grade ratings, the new school meets the requirements under DASNY's financing guidelines for the bonds to be issued as a general unsecured obligation of the university. The loan agreement may include additional security as determined by existing market conditions for similar credits. When looking at the recent financial information for the new school, like many higher education institutions, the university's enrollment and operations were negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of the pandemic, the new school transitioned to virtual programs beginning with the spring 2020 semester and continue with an online format for fall 2020 as well as spring 2021. Fall 2020 demand and enrollment were negatively impacted, with total FTE enrollment declining by 12.5% from the previous year. In addition, with management's strategic effort to reduce the density on campus, the university's housing capacity was at 10% during that time compared to nearly 90% for the previous year. The decline in total enrollment for fall of 20 resulted in diminished tuition revenue during fiscal year 21, while the shift to remote learning that began in the spring of 2020 and carried through the spring of the following year reduced auxiliary revenue. So as a result, the university posted an operating margin of negative $66.3 million in fiscal year 21. It's a much different story for the current fiscal year. The university returned to in-person instruction for the fall of 21, and freshman applications and enrollment rebounded to exceed pre-pandemic levels. Total FTE enrollment reached 10,167 for the fall of 21, which is an increase of 16.6% over the previous year and an all-time high for the university. As a result, the university expects operating results to improve during the current fiscal year. With enrollment at an all-time high and residence hall occupancy currently at 95%, the university is experiencing an increase in operating revenue, and management expects an operating surplus for the current fiscal year. When looking at the balance sheet, the new school's financial resources have grown over 5 years, despite the negative impact of the pandemic on the university's operations. Cash and investments increased by $110.5 million, or 29% over 5 years, mainly due to investment appreciation. Total net assets grew by $67.6 million over 5 years. So in summary, the university's enrollment and operations have rebounded in the current fiscal year following the challenges presented by the pandemic. The new school has also continued its strategic capital plan to reduce lease space and consolidate real estate around its university center. The proposed transaction will help further this strategic plan while also providing the university with savings through the purchase and renovation of the East 15th Street property and the refunding of the Series 2011 bonds. Mr. President, or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, David. Are there questions? Do the members have questions? Any questions for David? Comments on the presentation? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, from the membership to approve the transaction?
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Is there a second?
Second, Joan.
Thank you very much, Joan. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
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 Is there any opposition to the motion? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, the motion passes, and it passes unanimously. It is approved. Mr. President, your presentation begins at tab 6, so take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. In addition to being Groundhog's Day and the second day of Black History Month, yesterday was also the first day of the Lunar New Year, and 2022 is the year of the tiger.
The tiger.
And
sure.
a little research says that in Asian cultures, the tiger, not the lion, is the king of the jungle. People born during the tiger year are thought to be natural leaders who are born both brave and thrill-seeking, often craving attention. Yours truly was born in the year of the tiger, so you all can assess quietly whether I meet those standards. Moving on to more serious matters. Over the past couple of weeks, the governor has given her State of the State presentation, as well as her presentation on the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. Of course, the budget will be negotiated with the Assembly and the Senate. That process is going on now, and finally approved around April the 1st. I want to just highlight a few items in the budget proposal that impact DASNY. First, on non-for-profits, we have the opportunity to expand the construction and finance services that DASNY provides to nonprofit organizations. This would allow DASNY to issue bonds and do construction work on behalf of nonprofits. The nonprofits will still hold the debt, and there'll be no physical implications for the state or for DASNY. Second, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative is an economic development grant program awarded to cities on a competitive basis through the Department of State. This proposal in the budget would enable DASNY to do construction services for entities that win these grants. Next, a design build extender. The law authorizing certain state entities, not just DASNY, to use design build for capital project expires on 12/31/22. This bill would extend that for a 5-year period of time. Subsidiary extender. This would extend DASNY's current authority to establish holding companies to minimize risk when a hospital has defaulted on a DASNY loan or mortgage. This would extend that authorization for 3 years, and we would need to reauthorize to continue the 2 subsidiaries that we currently have. Pre-qualification. All New York State and local governments are authorized to do pre-qualification to ensure that the lowest responsible bidder is capable of doing the work that they're bidding on. Currently, DASNY does not have this authorization. The proposed bill extends pre-qualification to include DASNY only and no other entities. The Brownfield Opportunity Expansion Program encourages private sector cleanups of brownfields to promote their redevelopment. This bill would authorize DASNY to provide services for these projects and expand tax credits. And finally, expanding DASNY work for addiction services would authorize DASNY to develop capital projects for voluntarily operated addiction service programs. Finally, on the Office of Cannabis Management, the governor announced a $200 million fund to assist social equity applicants in the cannabis business to get loans from the state to establish their retail locations in various areas. This bill would also authorize DASNY to do construction work on behalf of the OCM and the fund to do the build out. DASNY would not be taking any financial risk, but it would be an additional capital program for us. So we're very pleased with the budget recommendations that the governor has made on behalf of DASNY. Obviously, the bill and the budget bill is much more wide reaching than that. Generally speaking, having listened to not only the budget presentation, but also a presentation from the divisional budget on the budget, I can report that given the federal grant money that has come into the state over the past year related to the pandemic and the infrastructure bill, the state is really feeling in good shape as far as the fiscal coffers of the state. Not only will be able to embark on a lot of capital programs that are very much needed, but the state is also looking to build its reserve fund over the next 5 years back up to 15% of the operating reserve, which is the recommendation and where the state would like to be. So, really feeling good about where we are from the state from a budget perspective. I think the governor has some excellent initiatives to help with the economic development, rebound from the pandemic, and make sure that those folks who are in a fragile situation in the state of New York also have the support services that they need. There is a minimum tax cut or minor tax cut for the middle income residents of the state of New York, as well as a property tax cut. So you can see that the state coffers are feeling much better. This is a very aggressive budget, and I think one that once the Assembly and the Senate finalize their negotiations, all of us will be proud of. That concludes my president's report. Any questions on that? Hearing none, I'll turn it over to our general counsel for her report. Nadine?
Ruben, thank you. Thanks very much. That's a great report.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Before the board today, you have a resolution for the selection of outside counsel. DASNY submitted a request for proposal for legal services on November 8th to obtain proposals from qualified law firms to establish 8 legal panels to provide representation to the authority during the period of 2021 through 2025. We sought representation, or the panels consist of the following areas: bond counsel, construction and general litigation counsel, real estate and environmental counsel, labor and employment law counsel, personal injury, bankruptcy and workout, and emerging firms, which include law firms that have been certified by the New York State Empire State Development Division of Minority and Women-Owned Businesses as certified minority and women-owned business enterprises pursuant to Article 15A of the executive law, as well as certified service-disabled veteran-owned businesses that are certified by the Office of General Services Division of SDVOB. Firms were required to have substantial legal experience in providing legal services in the areas required for the specific panels on which they sought to serve. They were required to have significant business presence in the state of New York, with attorneys licensed to practice in the state who will be primarily responsible for providing or supervising the services rendered in the engagement. And also, if they were not certified as an MWBE or SDVOB, the firms were also required to demonstrate that they had a firm commitment or sound diversity practices. DASNY received 72 proposals in response to the RFP. We had an evaluation committee, which consisted of members of the legal team and members throughout DASNY from the operations side of the house. Firms were required to demonstrate and provide it within their proposals, their general qualifications and experience to serve on the respective panels, qualifications and depth of experience for each proposer and proposed counsel in the practice area for the selection sought, a demonstration of relevant experience in representing municipalities, state or federal entities, or other similar entities. And we also evaluated the overall organization completeness and quality of the proposal, as well as the proposer's demonstration and commitment to diversity. After conducting and completing our evaluation, we identified 62 firms that are proposed and are submitted, included in the resolution before the board for approval. The resolution identifies the 62 firms as follows. There are 13 proposed firms for the bond counsel panel, 14 firms for the construction and general litigation panel, 12 firms for the real estate and environmental panel, 9 firms for labor and employment, 11 for bankruptcy and workout, 23 for emerging panels, 8 firms for personal injury, and 7 firms for specialty legal services. With that, that concludes my report. And if the board has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there questions for Nadine? Nadine, this represents a great deal of work. And I know you didn't do it alone, but in addition to your other responsibilities, sort of coming to closure on which firms are going to do what work, and getting comfortable with those decisions after interviewing and spending time with them. It's a big task. Thank you very much for working on it.
Thank you. I also have to extend my thanks to all the members of the team that participated, because this proposal was submitted in November, so the evaluations were conducted during the holiday season. So I have to extend my thanks to everyone who participated. And so I didn't do it alone. So I just wanted to make sure that I recognize that.
Thank you all. My thanks to everyone who participated in this effort. It's a huge but very important effort. I'm very grateful that we were able to come to closure. Nadine and I, before we vote on the resolution, Nadine and I have agreed that, well, Nadine may not agree with me, but I have asked her to take a good hard look at the label emerging firms. I more often than not find it offensive. There are firms on this list that emerged a long time ago. It's a convenient label. It is one the state uses. It is one that a lot of companies use, frankly, in the private sector. It's just inappropriate. And I think there may be, I won't hold you to it, Nadine, but there may be a better way to describe these firms. Having said all of that, and there being no questions for Nadine, may I have a motion, please, to approve the resolution, which I saw. Which appears at the very end of the tab 7.
So moved, Al. I'll make a
Thank you.
motion.
Thank you. That was the motion? That was you, Jerry?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Beryl.
Beryl, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none. The motion passes unanimously. The resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to tab 8 now. This is the financial report. Kim Ellis.
Thank you, Ruben. As highlighted in the standing financial report, we received $1.3 million in financing fees through December against a budgeted amount of $1.85 million. The percentage of direct hours charged to our public clients is down slightly from last month at 94.8, but remains slightly up against a budget of 92.5. And our total operating expenses are slightly under projection by $300,000. On the budget front, at the March meeting, members will be asked to review and approve the proposed 22-23 operating budget and financial plan. Based on the state's recently released proposed budget, we do expect to make adjustments to the budget presented to members at last month's meeting. Revenue projections for the CUNY program have improved. However, we're still anticipating a loss at the program level of approximately $2.4 million. Staff are still reviewing the state's numbers and updating for the most current information in preparation for presenting a revised 22-23 operating budget and financial plan next month. A few project updates. Our network segmentation project is a project that's been an ongoing initiative within our IS department for more than 5 years, related to an outstanding audit item. I'm pleased to report that we have reached an important milestone in the project where we've completed all the necessary steps to begin defining access rules between and within the network segments. This is the final phase of the project that's targeted for completion by the end of March. Our Clearwater implementation, which is the replacement of our SunGuard investment system. We're in the final testing and validation stages of the implementation and are preparing to upload live data to our JD Edwards financial system by the end of this week. Implementation of this new system will eliminate manual transaction posting efforts by staff and provide daily compliance reporting based on pre-established rules, such as our investment policy, permitted investments, and reserve fund sufficiency. The last phase of the implementation will be creating necessary reports required for our year-end audit activities, in addition to periodic reporting needs. Lastly, the year-end financial statement audit is underway. KPMG has begun their interim test work on activity through November 2021. That concludes my report.
Great report, Kimberly. Are there questions for Kim? Good to hear that the auditors are already working. Thank you
Seems
very
like
much.
they're always here.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. All right, thank you, Kim. Mr. President, we're going on to tab number 9.
Yeah, so behind tab number 9, we have Portia Lee's report to talk about public finance. Portia?
Thanks, Ruben. Brief market update for the board. Total new issue volume for January 2022 was approximately $24 billion, down 14.7% from last January's total of $28.18 billion. Total supply this week is expected to be about average, about 8.3 billion. Tax exempt bond yields were lower yesterday, with the 10-year AAA MMD decreasing by 5 basis points to 1.5%, and the 30-year AAA MMD yield decreasing by 4 basis points to 1.91%. However, this came on the heels of very big upward movement in MMD last week of 25 and 23 basis points respectively for the 10-year and the 30-year. U.S. government bond yields were higher as the 10-year Treasury yield increased by 2 basis points to 1.81%, and the 30-year Treasury increased by 1 basis point to 2.12%. Municipal bond funds reported outflows for the week ending January 26th, after reporting outflows for the previous week as well. Since the January 5th board meeting, the 1-year MMD rate has increased by 44 basis points, the 10-year by 43 basis points, and the 30-year by 38 basis points. In that same time period, the 10-year Treasury yield has increased by 15 basis points, and the 30-year increased by 5 basis points. Included in your board materials is the annual credit enhancement report for the not-for-profit portfolio. On the first page, the top pie charts show the amount of fixed rate debt versus variable rate debt for the not-for-profit portfolio. No surprises here. The percentage of fixed rate debt is growing year over year, while the variable rate portfolio is declining. I'd note that the total amount of debt for the not-for-profit portfolio institutions has decreased slightly from 16.259 billion in 2020 to 15.729 billion in 2021. The pie charts at the bottom of the page show outstanding debt by type of credit enhancement. Again, no surprises. The percentage of unenhanced debt has grown since last year, and debt with credit enhancement has declined. On page 2, you can see the type of credit enhancement and the specific providers for the variable rate portfolio for the not-for-profit institutions. I would note that the par amount of variable rate debt decreased slightly year over year from 1.945 billion to 1.775 billion. The next 2 pages show the same information in table format, and the last page shows the renewal dates for letters of credit in connection with private clients for the next several years. I would like to thank both Steve Kosher and Alex Sardine for their work in producing this report. Lastly, I would note that also included in your materials are bond sale summaries, which include performance metrics. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Are there questions for Portia?
I have just a couple. Based on the volatility of interest rates very recently, but also towards the end of last year as well, how is that impacting our pipeline of new financings? Is it paralyzing potential issuers or accelerating their trends to finance now? Do you see any effect of the volatility?
Yep. So absolutely, rates have been volatile. In particular, last week, the movement was really very big. We're seeing rates rise. I think that's been telegraphed for some time now. Clearly, the Fed meeting has reinforced that. I think we are hearing from institutions that they are thinking about issuing, given the rising rate environment, wanting to lock in lower rates. I think people are looking in particular, both on the new money side and also on their funding side, recognizing that if there's savings there, folks would like to lock those in.
Portia, why do you think the 10-year T-bill like really doesn't move, hasn't really moved like you would think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what's happening.
I realize it's sort of a stupid question because who the hell knows, but it just puzzles me, it just.
Yeah. Honestly, I think what's happening more is that, the MMD is moving pretty significantly in relation to the treasuries. But, honestly, Ruben, you probably have a better sense of that than I do.
Thanks, Portia, for putting the tiger on the spot today.
Well, it started with the question, Ruben, so I apologize for that. But, while we're on it, it just, and go ahead.
Yeah, no, we do believe that rates will be rising. I think that the Fed is concerned about inflation and how they're going to adjust against it. There is some uncertainty as to how much of the inflation is transitory versus actually built into the economy. But I think people are starting to feel like it is less transitory than we might have thought 6 to 8 months ago. However, our rate rise in the MMD market lagged historically over the last several months. And I think it's catching up. So that's why we're moving at 25 basis points when the Treasury might be moving 10 or so. But until the Fed moves, we won't see that. I do think we'll see more impact on the short end of the curve. And it'll be interesting to see how that comes out over the next 4 to 6 weeks. But we'll keep it monitoring.
And I have one more question. And this is either Ruben or Portia. Do you also see any difference in the mix between our education issuers and our healthcare issuers? I think there was a trend more towards the healthcare in the height of the pandemic and less towards the education. Do you see that continuing? Do you see a softening of the education market or any other of those trends? I'm just kind of considering the trends going forward.
In general, I think that, we have seen more activity in the higher ed space than in the healthcare space. I think particularly during the pandemic with sort of all that was going on, as far as the hospitals were concerned in their day-to-day activities. I mean, which is not to say that, the higher ed space wasn't challenged as well in terms of, keeping their operations moving. But from what we have seen in terms of calls that we're getting, it seems as though the higher ed space looks to be active again this year in terms of issuance. So, I think consistent with what we saw last year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Portia.
Portia, can you just mention that we talked last month that Gerard Clauser left? I know you've made one hire and have a couple postings up. Just give the board a briefing on that.
Certainly. So Gerard Clauser did retire right around the holidays. We are happy to have brought over John Fanek into the public finance and portfolio monitoring group. John has spent many years working in Kim's area in the finance department. So we're really pleased to be able to welcome him. Obviously, he's very familiar with public finance, in terms of the work that we do in general. So looking to drill down both on the portfolio side as well as public finance and expand that knowledge base.
Thanks, Portia. I just want to highlight that, we have been released to hire people and replace folks who do retire. And all of our groups have done a good job of looking internally first, giving people the opportunity to move up or move over. And then we have quite a few postings, not just in Portia's group, but in several other groups, including construction, that are out in the marketplace now. So we are getting some, fresh blood at DASNY. We are seeing quite a few retirements, all of which I think was delayed because of the pandemic on both sides of that equation. So we're seeing a lot more activity in our HR group now. I just wanted to highlight that in Portia's report. Thank you, Portia. Appreciate it. We now turn to tab 10 and Steve Curl with his construction report. Steve?
Thanks, Ruben. Good morning, everyone. Just a quick update on a couple of the customer agencies' capital programs. I'll start with SUNY. The FIT project that I've reported on in the past received a NOSC. That's a notice of substantial completion for contract 1, the foundation work, just this past month. Contract 2 is now underway. That includes the balance of the construction and fit out of the 10-story building. Construction also began on the renovation of Smith Hall at SUNY Cortland. This is a $15 million tower that began in December. Substantial completion is targeted for July of this year. Awasting Hall at SUNY New Paltz is planning a May start. That's a $42 million renovation project. Our CM at risk contractor is in place and we're working with them to begin that project. And Colonial Quad at SUNY Albany, $43 million renovation of 2 residence halls and an infill with a fitness facility. That is in the bid phase right now. We're using the bid by invitation process. Construction is scheduled to begin between May and June, July of this year. The 13 summer projects are currently in pre-construction phase. They'll begin mid-May, I would say. On to OMH. Project activity continues across many of the OMH campuses statewide. For the $406 million Mid-Hudson Forensic Psychiatric Center, the designer of record continues with 30% document preparation. The $140 million Central New York Psych Center project is now moving along and is in the early construction phase. And the $40 million Western New York Children's renovation project, design has been completed. We plan to advertise that project for bid in the next month or two. The next OMH monthly project status meeting is scheduled for February 15th. On to OPWDD. Project activity here remains pretty high. DASNY field staff supporting the Sunmount DDSO are really gearing up for a heavy summer. There's about 15 active projects that are on the books. They'll begin later this spring. We have a large site restoration project that's got a duration of about 3 years down at the Broome County DDSO. And DASNY is actively administratively working toward pushing the 2021-22 OPWDD community minor maintenance projects, 29 of them along, and we're gearing up and bringing some architects on to begin the design work there. At OPWDD's request, we re-engineered much of our reporting to that customer agency. We delivered that in mid-January for the first time. And the next OPWDD project status meeting is set up for February 18th. On to Javits. DASNY is working with the Javits owners team to advance the temporary approval for occupancy for the merged South expansion and transformer buildings. FDNY completed their testing of the merged facility. They delivered a notice of defect to the owners team. DASNY identified a subset of the FDNY defects, and we're working with the owners team to address those, close them out as a condition of issuing the TAO for the merged facility. Over at Moynihan, the work continues on phase 3, the Facebook fit out, as well as permitting of additional commercial and entertainment space in the train hall itself. Phase 2 of the project, the train hall, which we finished and opened December 31st of 2020, this month received a code compliance certificate. And what this does is it formally closes out DASNY's involvement with phase 2 of the project. On to Gozer, we're down to about 9 months before this program closes. All projects need to be completed by September of this year. 23 active projects continue currently. Of the 23, DASNY management is heavily involved with about 3 projects that have proven to be quite challenging for any number of reasons. More to come as we approach September. And lastly, on DOH, DASNY continues to move the lab project along. We're working with the controller's office seeking approval for a reprogramming effort aimed at aligning the project's cost estimate with the $750 million budgeted appropriation. Just quickly on the administrative side, vaccine mandates. So our mental hygiene customer agencies implemented a vaccine mandate last Friday, January 27th, requiring all consultant, contractor, and DASNY staff stationed at or performing design and construction tasks under the direction of DASNY to have received at least one dose of the vaccine. Otherwise, they would not be allowed onto the mental hygiene campuses or facilities. DASNY worked with OGS and OMH to prepare a declaration stating that DASNY's prime consultants, subconsultants, contractors, and subcontractors were compliant with the mandate. And shout out to Nadine. She did a great job really heading this up and coordinating with the 4 customer agencies that kind of fall under this mandate, as well as with OMH. She did a great job for us. PM Web, real quickly, we continue with the phase 1 implementation. Consultant payments have been the focus recently, and the configuration is nearly complete. And DASNY is beginning to process payments through the system today. Over 30 projects are now in the system. We're looking to complete phase 1 by May of this year. We continue to add select projects into the system, and a phase 2 will follow later on this year. Staffing continues to be challenging given the multiple variables, retirements, anticipated retirements, workload, program fee caps, and workforce availability. The construction division is currently recruiting for approximately 20 positions for department areas, including our codes group, our construction project management group, and procurement. And lastly, I'm delivering a number of DASNY presentations on behalf of DASNY to a number of construction division associations. I delivered a DASNY update to the American Council of Engineering Companies this past Monday. On February 16th, there's a SUNY Physical Plant Administrators Association presentation. And on February 24th, the New York City Professional Women in Construction are hosting a panel that I've been asked to join titled The Future of Higher Education. And that concludes my report.
Steve,
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Steve could be my straight man because he never highlights his work to the degree I would like to highlight it. So I'll jump in here. FIT, when I joined DASNY in the end of 19, I met with Dr. Brown over at FIT. There was real concern that project would not get done. We really had a difficult time getting the bids in the right place, getting the funding correct. So seeing that phase 1 being complete and phase 2 coming out of the ground is a fantastic accomplishment for the construction group. Congratulations to you guys on that, Steve. Also, the Mid-Hudson Valley Psych Center, that was put on hold for a while. There was actually some concern over the past few years whether that would actually happen at all. So it was great to see that project moving along. We talked probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, about SUNY summer programs really slowing down, and that being something we were worried about from a budget perspective. It's great to see we have a full slate of SUNY summer programs coming along. And Steve kind of brushed over how difficult it has been to adjust to retirements and people coming and going, the pandemic, the requirements from OMH and others around vaccines. He has done a fantastic job along with the staff of managing a difficult environment from a construction perspective. And so I just want to shout out to Steve particularly, but also to the rest of the staff. They've really pushed and pulled and jumped and gone and gone over the really getting things over the finish line. And just proud of the work that they have done. It's really exciting to see that activity really picking up now. So Steve, shout out to you guys. I just want to highlight that for the board, but a lot of great stuff being done in the construction group.
Thank you.
I'd add that to Ruben that, DASNY continues to be one of the leading public construction operations in the country. And so, we all, we hear the reports, and unfortunately we don't see the photos anymore, Steve, because we're not yet back in the board, but we look forward to actually seeing some of the fine work that's done in construction. So I just thought I would add that as sort of your real estate construction member of the board. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that.
Steve, you got a lot of great fans at DASNY and on the board. You're doing a terrific job. That was a great report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, that concludes the staff reports today.
Thank you, sir. Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, the next regular meeting is scheduled for the 2nd of March. It's going to be an interesting period between now and then because the executive order that allows us to have the meetings in this format expires on the 14th of February. So unless it is renewed or extended, we're actually going to have to be in place somewhere. I don't know where that meeting is scheduled to be, the March meeting.
Scheduled to be in New York, Mr. Chair.
Say again?
It's scheduled to be in New York in March.
Okay, thank you very much,
Good.
Sarah. Thank you. So we'll just wait to hear from staff as to what we're going to have to do and where we're going to be. Thank you.
What date is that again, Al? I'm sorry. What date is that?
2 March.
March 2nd. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be in the, hopefully the latest variant will continue its decline and we can actually try again to go back into the office.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Thank you, Jerry. I believe a number of us are scheduled for ethics training with Monica Norris. That is going to happen tomorrow. You've already received notices about that. The time, I think, is from 10 to noon. And I gather it's going to be Zoom. The format would be the Zoom format. Am I right about that, Sarah? Is that the ethics training?
Yes. Yep, and what I'll do is I'll talk to Monica and make sure that the members all have that information at the top of their inboxes for how to connect into that.
Hey, Sarah, I don't know.
And Sarah, I got 1:30 to
So do
3:30.
I have 1:30 as well. I was trying to figure out, I wasn't available at 10. I have 1:30.
Me too.
So there are different ethics training sessions, I gather. I didn't know that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hey, Sarah.
I'll make
Sarah,
sure you have
Jerry.
the master schedule, Mr. Chair. Yep, sorry,
Sorry,
Jerry.
Jerry, I might have sort of missed that. I mean, I know I got emails and I'm not sure if I responded. Can you sort of like add me to the 10 o'clock? Or to the 1:30, whatever is possible? I might have screwed that one up.
We can connect
If you
after
could.
this, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Then having gotten through all of that, are there any other matters to come before this board? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Joan, second.
All in favor, please indicate with aye.
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 Aye. Are there is there any opposition to adjourning the meeting? I doubt that there is. Are there any abstentions from the vote? Then the meeting is adjourned unanimously.
Thank
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.